You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. I'm Dr. Joshua Lindell. I am a paleoanthropologist studying Neanderthals, and I'm here with...
I'm Dr. Kimberly Pomp. I'm a bioarchaeologist. I study human skeleton health and disease and evolution.
I'm Dr. Ross Barnett, ancient DNA person interested in Ice Age mammals.
And I am Dr. Andrew Kinkella. I am here for the mysteries of the ancient Maya, and I also do a lot of archaeology in Southern California.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Kinkella. We have invited you here today because we are reviewing a movie called Don Verdean from 2015. Is that what year this movie's from? I had never heard of this movie until I started putting together a list of Stone Age and archaeology themed movies. Had anybody ever heard of this movie?
No, never.
I feel like I vaguely remember when it came out and thinking, oh man, the thing that we all think, oh man, I got to see this because my students are going to ask me about this one. But that was it. I'd never seen it until now.
This movie is from writers and directors Jared and Jerusha Hess, who are most famous for Napoleon Dynamite and the follow-up Nacho Libre. And I think maybe the reason why nobody heard of this one is because, according to IMDb, it has grossed $31,000.
Oh, man.
I don't know how much it cost, but it had to be a fair bit more than that. So...
That's
it has
crazy.
bad reviews everywhere. It's got a 5.4 on IMDb, but I liked it.
I really liked it.
I didn't
I thought it
hate
was
it.
great. Yeah,
I didn't hate it.
I thought it was. I thought it was good.
I mean, it wasn't painful. I did watch it at 1.25 though. Okay, honestly, you've only been here for the good movies though. You've been here for what, Jurassic Park and stuff? Like, you got to meet us.
Yeah.
We got to invite him for just a regular movie that we watch, and then he'll change his tune.
Yeah. Our baseline is so low.
I do feel your pain. I do feel your pain because I've seen some stinkers, my friend. But I don't know. We'll get into it. I thought this movie was like pure terrible. Like, I thought it was pure shit. And there's certain reasons. It has to do with, it gets very deep and very psychological in terms of what I think is truly bad, like the kernel of true terribleness. And I think this movie achieves it. I do think it's one of the worst movies I've ever seen, which is, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's because it's because of what it wants to be versus where it gets. And it doesn't have to do with money, or acting or anything like that. It's like it's set to achieve a certain thing, and it fell so far below where it was trying to go. That's why I think it's so bad, because it's an utter failure. It's failed in like all dimensions. And that's why it only made $30,000. Like, I think, it's terrible.
The story is kind of like meandering. Like, if you were to sort of figure out like what is like the story arc, it's kind of like a bunch of stuff happens, and it kind of is hard to track the like through line of like what's the point of this story, right?
Yeah, and you can take.
I could jump in and say that. I mean, maybe I'm coming at it from a very Eurocentric direction, but I thought it was fairly clear. So it's like a redemption arc. I mean, in that way, I thought it was good, and that it was almost sort of biblical in its kind of aspiration. So you've got Don Verdean as a humble guy who wants to get stronger in his faith. He makes a few small mistakes. He kind of gets caught in a small lie, which snowballs. And he ends up, because of his sort of small sins, they kind of get bigger and bigger until he almost damns himself. And then at the end, you've got a little bit of hope for redemption, which I thought was kind of neat. And it also like very viscerally skewers biblical archaeology and sort of the kind of strand of evangelism that's very keen on trekking up Mount Ararat and finding the Ark of the Covenant, etc., which I've never seen kind of skewered in this sort of way before, especially not by an American from an American viewpoint. It's so kind of ridiculous that I'm amazed that it hasn't been kind of lambasted before. But I guess also at the same time, a lot of people are very sympathetic to that kind of worldview, and so that also explains why it only made 30 grand.
Well, I also liked it quite a bit. Like, it's not perfect. I can see some flaws with it, but I really liked it, and mainly because of the people in it. I think they're very funny. And then another thing is we have Danny McBride as this sort of evangelist pastor, and more recently he's sort of expanded on this role in the series The Righteous Gemstones. Have you seen that one?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've not.
Some of them, not all of it.
Not about archaeology, but just about the sort of ultra rich televangelist pastor family who runs this mega church, and it's essentially the same role, except that he's got a much bigger church in that one, also with John Goodman. Anyway, Andrew, can we ask you to summarize this movie for anybody who may not have seen this very obscure and unknown movie?
Sure, and beware spoilers. Here it comes. So where do we start? So we start actually with sort of a degraded VHS copy of kind of your cliche pseudo-archaeologist played by Sam Rockwell, right? He's the main character. And for those of you who are fans of Sam Rockwell, you know that he's a fan of doing these sort of offbeat, kind of wacky characters, these kind of odd ducks, right? And he has that kind of in his arsenal. So as I go through this, I will say I'm fine with the actors, as I often am. Like, I think they did a fine job. It was just with what they had to work with. So anyway, it starts with this VHS copy of kind of the cliche pseudo-archaeologist, right? Like Ross was saying, the climbing up of Mount Ararat and looking into this sort of largely biblical archaeology world. And you can tell this guy's a fraud, and you can tell he's just sort of there for the show. Very Graham Hancock, taking a swing at that. Then it cuts, and it's like 10 years later, and he's in this church, and there's not too many people listening to him, and you can tell he's kind of lost his luster, and he lives in an RV, but there's this pastor who is like, hey, how about you work for me and you start getting relics for me, and that I can show in my church, because my church is lagging with its converts, right? And he's like, okay. So he also has a connection in Israel to what's his name? Mr. Fly to the Conchords.
Jermaine Clement.
Yeah, Jermaine Clement, right? So Jermaine Clement plays sort of like the kind of the Israeli guy who goes out and grabs relics, right? Like kind of with a phone call. So at first he shows that he has this this stone sort of formation, this natural geologic formation that he calls Lot's wife. And it is funny. I thought that was a funny moment in the movie where you have this this stone that looks vaguely feminine with like two obvious big boobs on it, right? And they're like, it's lots, and they said it was 97% like salt content. If you know the Lot's wife story, I got to give him to that. It was pretty funny. But then he has Jermaine Clement go get it. Of course, they get the wrong stone. But they sort of pull the wool over the parishioners, and the parishioners go with it. And then they're like, we need another one. So the idea is they're going to go get the skull of Goliath, right? They got to find the skull of Goliath, and as the movie progresses, you know that Sam Rockwell is getting deeper and deeper into his various lies, right? So now he's like, he sort of has let go of trying to find anything quote unquote real. He's just like, I just got to find a skull. And so he actually goes out to Israel and looks for the last known location of Goliath. He can't really find it. Then he Googles that night. He's like, I need a skull, right? So he Googles like he Googles like isn't it like Israelis with gigantism or something like that?
Yeah.
And then he comes up with, what's the dude's name? Johnny Jerusalem.
Johnny Jerusalem.
I do have to say that was funny too. I gotta give him that. The idea Johnny Jerusalem was, according to the movie, like a wrestler or something who died in 1947. And so late at night, of course, Sam Rockwell goes and he sneaks in and he steals the skull of Johnny Jerusalem. He grave robs, right? He takes Johnny Jerusalem's skull. He of course buries it. He salts his own site with Johnny Jerusalem's skull. And then the next day he has his love interest, like the girl in her name's Carol. She's from The Office, right?
Yeah.
Amy Ryan.
Amy Ryan, yeah. Right? I thought Amy Ryan did a great job. And he has her actually, quote unquote, find the skull. It's of course a big deal. They bring it back to America, but then of course, his avarice gets the best of him because apparently there's a Chinese billionaire who wants part of it, who wants in, and will give them much more money. He breaks up with the church, and then he's going to go find the Holy Grail, which of course becomes a huge fiasco because he has to add to his lies, and he makes basically an entire fake tomb for the Holy Grail, and he brings the Chinese billionaire with him. It's all fake, and he grabs the Holy Grail, and Jermaine Clement's there too, and there's an accidental shot where the Chinese billionaire actually gets shot. They end up having to bring him to the hospital, and then the whole house of cards falls down, basically. It turns out that there's this other pastor who's been against them this whole time, and the whole thing has been a sort of a double ruse. Not only has Don Verdean been lying in terms of trying to get the fake Holy Grail, but also this other pastor has set up the whole thing. The Chinese billionaire is not actually a Chinese billionaire. At the end, basically everyone goes to jail. Right, that's it. And then at the last scene is that Don Verdean is there in jail, and he meets his love interest, Amy Ryan's son, who we do know is in jail from the very beginning, who needs a father figure. And as we zoom out, we know that Don Verdean is going to be the father figure of this young man in jail. The end. There you go.
All right, so normally after we review, summarize the movie, we nitpick the inaccuracies, and this one's going to be a little tricky because it's all frauds, and so of course it's all inaccuracies, and so maybe we've got a few pedantic ones. I do have one thing that I wanted to point out. When he digs up Goliath's skull, or he digs up the fake Goliath skull, he fakes a stone injury to it to make it look like Goliath was hit in the head with a rock. So he chisels out a hole and embeds a rock into it. And he describes the placement of that rock as... Where is it in my notes here? The press release says there's a river stone embedded in the frontonasal suture. And just because I'm a bones guy, it's not. It's embedded in... The frontonasal suture is a real suture, but it's not in the frontonasal suture. It's right in the middle of the frontal squama, which is several inches away, because this is a very big skull. Several inches away from the frontonasal suture. So, I mean, that's the inaccuracies that I can nitpick in this. Everything else is intentionally inaccurate. I don't know if anybody has anything else.
Well, I mean, the skull was greatly exaggerated and not what a someone with acromegaly would look like, right?
Yeah.
It's what Goliath would look like, but not... Yeah.
I have an opposite nitpick where with the carbon-14 dates, if you guys remember, there's a moment, I think they say that the bad guys are one of them says they're going to carbon-14 date Lot's wife. I think, you're going to carbon-14 date Lot's wife, and then actually Don Verdean's actually carbon-14 doesn't work on stone, and so it's look at that. You know, so I thought that was actually kind of cool.
That was really good.
Yeah.
I wrote down the exact quote. He says, "Everyone with half a brain knows that carbon dating is ineffective on mineralized fossil. The isotopes are rendered useless."
That's pretty, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
pretty good.
So I think the main thing that we can talk about with regards to this movie is its references, because it's doing two things. It's referencing a whole bunch of actual Bible stuff, which may or may not have sort of historical correlates. But it's also referencing a ton of pseudoarchaeology stuff. And most of this is like really quick in passing. It's just throwing away references to pseudoarchaeology. And I have a feeling the average person would miss all of these things because they're mostly just like one sentence here and there. But you host the Pseudoarchaeology podcast, so I'm wondering if you were keeping track of how many references to common pseudoarchaeology topics we get in this movie.
I was not. I can't believe you put me on the spot like that, Josh, and make me look the fool.
Don't worry, I was keeping track. So what I think we can do is we can go through all these pseudoarchaeology topics and see how many you've actually covered on your show. And if you haven't covered them, then you've got new episode ideas.
And actually, while I joke, I did put one or two in my notes, but you go and I'll just I'll react.
Well, we've already mentioned one because you recently did an episode on is carbon dating fake?
Right.
And so we've already talked about the carbon dating. And it is interesting that he doesn't say carbon dating is fake. He believes in carbon dating. He just says you can't carbon date a pillar of salt, which is
and there's a plot point later too where like they have to pay off the carbon-14 guy, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a major part in the movie to have him lie.
And maybe this is a bigger question we can circle back to later about whether Don Verdean really believes in what he's doing until he starts faking it in this movie. Does he really believe he's doing real archaeology, or does he think that he's faking it all the way along? And maybe we'll circle back to that after we discuss the movie a little bit more. Okay, so obviously we have tons of biblical references. We have references to the Ark of the Covenant. I don't know if you've. I was going back through your episodes. You've reviewed lots of Indiana Jones movies. So you've probably covered some of these topics there.
In terms of covering the Ark, I haven't. You know what? I don't think I've done one coldly on the Ark. I've done one. I did one on. There was actually a government, like a top secret government, like CIA plan to find the Ark, kind of in the 80s. And the idea was that they were bringing in people with ESP, like, right. So this is where your money, dear Americans, this is where your tax money is going. and this actually brings up a larger thing of the whole, like, are there UFOs? Which of course there's not. But the reason what they're going to find when they open all that UFO stuff, it's not that they're going to find UFOs. They're going to find all the government overspending on these idiotic things. So I actually looked at this one from the late 80s. They brought in a bunch of people who said they had ESP, and then they started asking them where stuff was. And one of them was on the Ark of the Covenant, and they interviewed this guy, and then he was in his ESP mode, and they're like, "Where's the Ark?" And the guy's like, "I see a cave. I see a cave in the Middle East. I see a box. I see a box." And he is literally describing Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's like, dude, you're doing this like 5 years after Raiders of the Lost Ark came out, and this dude, it's freaking ludicrous. But so my point being, I've looked at the Ark like that, but I've never done the like, hey, let's look at the history, whatever history there may be of this. So there you go. The Ark.
We first hear about, we basically only hear about the Ark of the Covenant when Tony Lazarus, Danny McBride's character, hires Don Verdean for the first time, and they're spitballing about what he should look for next. And he says, you should look for the Ark of the Covenant. And Don Verdean says, no, that's already been found. It's at the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Ethiopia. And that is a true claim. Mm-hmm. There are several claims about where the Ark of the Covenant is today, and that church does claim to have it, and they don't allow access by anybody to see it, so it's impossible to verify that in any way at all.
handily.
So that's our first pseudoarchaeology deep cut, is that he says, no, we do know where the
Right.
Ark of the Covenant is. All right, what do we have next here? We have the Holy Grail, of course, because that's what they look for at the end. There's a pretty fun montage where they're trying to make a fake Holy Grail.
What I love, though, is that the whole of their setup is essentially just like Andrew was saying for the ESP guy. It's just the Last Crusade, even down to the Grail Knight being there. It's just, it's wonderful. And they even recycle some of the quotes. So the fake Chinese billionaire is like, it's more beautiful than I ever imagined, which is exactly what Julian Glover says when he finds it in Last Crusade. So I thought that was really fun.
We have a reference to Oak Island. I'm not sure if they even say Oak Island, but I think they say that island in Nova Scotia or something like that. Did you catch that one?
Oh, man. I now that you say, I'm like, that's right. The island in Nova Scotia thing. Yeah. Curse of Oak Island.
They say that FDR was involved in that one, which is also true. FDR he started a company or was part of a company in the early 20th century that was looking for treasure on Oak Island, one of the many, many companies over the past 200 or 300 years that have been trying to dig up treasure on Oak Island. Of course, Oak Island today, most famous for the ongoing TV series where they're continuing to excavate and find nothing.
Yeah. It's impressive.
No pirate treasure. Anyway, they found some nails and coconut husks.
Yeah.
And I haven't watched it because I learned my lesson with Finding Bigfoot. You can only make a TV series for so many seasons and not find anything, because once you find it, the show's over. So
the real treasure is the friends you make along the way. Yeah. I mean, that's really...
Have you done an episode on Oak Island?
I've been saving it. There's certain ones where I'm like, I'm gonna save this one from really in need. But I guess Oak Island, and that's the other thing. Oak Island is kind of fun and not fun at the same time, because, like you're saying, they haven't found anything. So it's like, here, let me give you the history of the show. Let me show you these characters. This is how they string you along, But then a lot of times with those, at the end, the audience, listen to my show, they're like, wah, wah, wah. Why'd you tell us this, Andrew? Damn it, Yeah. So we shall see. But it's on my B team list.
Another one that sort of factors into the plot is the Kensington Runestone. And have you done an episode about that one? I was scrolling through and I couldn't find one in the title.
Look at this. I'm just a loser. I haven't done any of these. Kensington Runestone, though. Kensington Runestone is an obvious fake. I think this is also on my B list, but I haven't done it because I'm like, can I fill 35 minutes with Kensington Runestone? I was thinking of maybe like finding other runestones or something and doing like a runestone show. I've done that kind of stuff in the past where I did a show on monoliths, because I couldn't fill a whole show with this like singular monolith that was found, so I had to do a monolith theme. I think I'll do the same thing with runestones, but Kensington Runestone is a easy fake. Although I think, and this I might be quoting myself incorrectly, there might be like a real archaeologist out there who said something about the Kensington Runestone being real, and I'm like, what are you saying? Like it's such an obvious freaking fake. But anyway, that's why I got a Kensington Runestone. It's fake. It's one of the many. Don't waste your time.
Did you possibly listen to a recent episode of the Great Plains Archaeology podcast talking about the Kensington Runestone?
No, I didn't know he did it. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because he is discussing this archaeologist who suggests there's a possibility that's real, which was very surprising to me.
I think we're thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. The reason why that's surprising is the Kensington Runestone is a slab of sandstone that was found in Minnesota in the 1800s. By a Swedish immigrant, because we have Scandinavian immigrants in Minnesota, written in Swedish runes. And when they analyze the runes, the like wording and grammar and structure of the runes it's claimed to be from like the year 1400 or something, but the linguistic structure is pretty much identical to 1800s Swedish.
Yep.
And so that's the main reason why we know it's fake. Plus, it was found by a Swedish immigrant in a place full of Swedish immigrants, suggesting, and so it ties into this whole legacy of, this connection to colonialism and racism in pseudoarchaeology, where all the Swedish immigrants are looking for some proof that they were there longer than they actually were. Mm. And so it all aligns to a fraud, but I guess there is an archaeologist who thinks that there's something to it, and I'm not exactly sure what the argument is.
I don't get it. Yeah, I was gonna go on a journey to find out what the counter argument is, but I'm just gonna be bummed. I don't know, how much negativity can I take in my life? You know what I mean? I'm like, oh God, I'll go down, and I'll just get angry, and then I don't know, maybe ignorance is bliss, but I don't know. Josh, you sound like you're not a believer either. What do you, Josh?
Well, the Steelman argument for it is that we know that Vikings landed in Newfoundland. They settled in Newfoundland for at least a year, around the year 1000, and that we know that actual expedition, that was Leif Erikson's expedition. And they had the three places in Canada. There were Vinland and Markland and something else, which is Baffin Island, Labrador, and Newfoundland. And so if the Vikings are capable of making it there, they're also capable of sailing up the St. Lawrence River through the Great Lakes, and then Minnesota's right there at the end of the Great Lakes. So that's the argument. But the problem with it is that there's no other evidence of Viking settlements or anything anywhere along that route. There is other evidence in Minnesota in the form of other frauds, because there's some sort of sword, there's some sort of Viking sword that a farmer allegedly found in Minnesota. So we have a bunch of stuff in Minnesota, right where all of the Scandinavian people settled, and they keep finding Scandinavian stuff there. Yeah. But nothing in between Newfoundland and Minnesota, which is, you'd expect to be finding stuff along the way. Also, Vikings were sailing these big long ships. I'm pretty sure that there are some giant waterfalls along that route, like Niagara Falls. I'm not sure how you get your Viking ships up there.
They just ported it around, dude. No big deal. I know. Yeah, that's all of that is obviously true. And again, the grammar thing. I'm like, it's like saying something is in Old English, but it's in modern English. It's come on. The Kensington Runestone is in modern script. It's like, just stop, but they won't. Welcome to my life. No, it's pseudo-archaeology podcast. It's like, facts do not matter.
Okay, last big pseudo-archaeology thing here is connecting the Kensington Runestone to the Holy Grail through the Knights Templar. Right. And so the whole Kensington Runestone thing is a pretty big throwaway. He's like, based on my analysis of the Kensington Runestone, the Holy Grail is in this cave in the American Southwest because the Kensington Runestone tells what the Knights Templar did. Now, that's just an outright not true statement. The Kensington Runestone tells about some Scandinavian explorers and it does have a story about, like, that's what the text of it says. It says there were these Scandinavian explorers that made it there around the year 1400. But he says according to his analysis of the Kensington Runestone, the Knights Templar brought the Holy Grail to the Americas and hid it in this cave in the American Southwest. And this is where, for me, the trail gets pretty fuzzy, but there's a whole big thing. Oak Island is supposed to be a place where the Templars landed as well. There's a whole American mythology about the Knights Templar bringing the Holy Grail to the Americas before Columbus and hiding it. And I have this strong memory of watching something which actually placed the Holy Grail or the Knights Templar in a cave in the American Southwest. And I think it has something to do with Scott Walter. Do you know that guy?
I don't, or I forget which one he is.
I found a few documentaries on YouTube, and one of them, let me see, it is called Holy Grail in America, which came out in 2009. So I'm pretty sure that Jared and Jerusha Hess watched this movie, this documentary, documentary with air quotes. But then there's a series which I found some videos on YouTube, which I'm pretty sure are from the same series, but it has all these different names. So I remember watching it on TV under the name America Unearthed, hosted by Scott Walter. On YouTube, the title says Mysteries Unearthed, which I imagine must have been like for an international market or something.
Sometimes they re-edit, for... Yeah.
But anyway, Scott Walter is a forensic geologist, and he did this series, I think, for the History Channel around this time, around 2010, where he would go all over the Americas and look at these potentially real archaeology sites, which turned out to be mostly pseudoarchaeology or misinterpretations of natural phenomena. And of course, as a forensic geologist, he's always looking at the stone evidence and pretty much ignoring any actual artifactual or cultural evidence ever. And to his credit, on a couple of episodes, he looks at something and he's like, "Yep, that is a natural geological formation. There's some sort of like road or wall in Texas." And he looked at it and he's like, "Nope, that's just a natural geological formation." But he got on a real Knights Templar kick, and his whole first season ended on a whole bunch of Knights Templar episodes. And I didn't have time to go back and find all the exact episodes and watch several hours worth of them to try and figure out if he's the source for this idea of the Knights Templar hiding in a cave in the American Southwest.
What I've found with all this stuff, there's several things here. First, the Knights Templar is just a catch-all, right? It's used all the time in pseudoarchaeology. If you need some sort of mystery, you just slather on Knights Templar. The other thing I've found is if anyone says any sort of weird ass story with the Knights Templar, it just sticks and it never goes away. So today on this podcast, we could say something. We could be like, and that's why the Knights Templar secretly built the Golden Gate Bridge. Then that comes out and it never, ever dies. It never dies. It's shocking, like how you need nothing. All you really need is a good story because people want to hear it. They want just that. I mean, I made up that Golden Gate Bridge off the top of my head right now, right on this date, March 30th. But it will live if they want it to forever. And then people like me who then later talk against it, they like, you don't know. How do you know? You don't know. I've gotten stuff like, you so-called archaeologist. My favorite one is when they call me a so-called archaeologist. I'm like, I'm actually probably the most cliche archaeologist you could find. Like, I kind of have it all. But anyhow, so when it comes to, again, Knights Templar, any bullshit story lasts forever. And I have done shows on like Rosicrucianism, which kind of like goes into all this, and also like Helena Blavatsky, and there's this sort of angle from American culture that started around 1900 or so that kind of takes this kernel of Rosicrucian, Knights Templar, this kind of mythology, and kind of runs with it. And so, and that aspect is still around today. So it's an easy, basal story to stick anything on. And so that's what you have here.
Knights Templar and Rosicrucians always also get connected to the stonemasons and also to the Illuminati.
Yes.
And it's like the sort of QAnon style. Yeah. You can connect everything together. Nothing's a coincidence. Yeah. And so that's one of the reasons why everything sort of has the staying power, because you connect so many threads that, you know, if you want to keep one part of it, you pull all the rest of it along with it.
And it's attractive. Everyone wants this. You know, we even us here on this podcast, we want it in a way secretly. Because we love these stories, right? We want aliens to be true. We want there to be an Atlantis. We want all that stuff because it's just cooler, right?
Yeah, we want to be the ones to find it though, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And these guys, the people, and I have experience in that television world. It's like when it comes to those shows, they're just trying to sell. They're trying to like get it greenlit. They'll say anything. They're just going for it. I respect those shows at the same time because I understand how difficult it is. But they were playing way too fast and loose, on that show, and they shouldn't have. And that's too bad.
Well, another thing we can talk about is all of the biblical references in this, and I always kind of take it for granted that everybody knows all the Bible stories.
I don't know.
Most people in North America are raised vaguely Christian, but my partner was raised in a very non-Christian family, so she's always amazed by the biblical stories that I tell her.
I was raised as a total atheist, and I don't say that like as a point of pride, but just as a point of kind of ignorance. Like, I don't know any of that stuff, and I wish I knew more.
Unless it was covered on The Simpsons, I don't know it.
Right. Me too.
So maybe it's worth going through some of these stories. So how many do we know the story of Lot's wife and why she was turned to a pillar of stone, a pillar of salt?
I do.
I only know it from the lady's song.
Ross, how far back you want to start the story with when the two angels arrive in Sodom and Gomorrah and they meet Lot? Is that where we want to start that story?
I mean, that probably. And I mean, I've sort of put myself in it. I know the story, but maybe not as detailed as you do, Josh. I mean, they arrive, they tell Lot and his wife they have to leave Sodom and Gomorrah because they're going to basically get biblical on its ass. And the one kind of thing they say to them is, don't look back. You mustn't look back as you're leaving Sodom and Gomorrah. And then, for reasons I can't quite remember, Lot's wife does look back and she gets turned into a pillar of salt. And it's just a really weird story. I remember as well, this is one of the things that Von Daniken, rest his soul, also used as part of his tapestry of nonsense. And that he claimed that obviously this was evidence that Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed in a nuclear blast. And the reason why Lot's wife turned to salt is that she was basically incinerated by thermonuclear explosion.
That's right.
Yeah.
Ross, let me expand on this story for you a bit, okay? God sends two angels to Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't remember which city Lot and his family are living in, but he has a wife and two daughters. The angels come to town. They're basically like checking it out because God's like, I think this place kind of sucks and I got to wipe it off the map. Check out and make sure there's nobody good there. And so the angels go to town and they find Lot, and Lot invites them inside. And then an angry mob comes to his door and they knock on his door and they're like, hey, Lot, we know you've got two strangers in there. We know you've got two visitors to town. Send them out so we can rape them. And Lot's like, no, that's not very cool. We have to be hospitable to these guests because Lot is the only good guy in town, right? Because it's Sodom and Gomorrah. And they're like, no, let us rape them or we're going to break down your door. And so he's like, no, that's not cool. We have to be nice to these guests. Why don't I offer up to you my two daughters instead, and you can rape my daughters instead of these guests, because these people are guests in our town. And the angels say, wow, Lot is a really good guy. Everybody else in town is terrible, so Lot, here's the inside story. We're scoping this town out because God is going to destroy it. You're the only good guy in town, so please take your family and get out of town. Because you are a good guy for offering up your daughters to be raped instead of us. And then Lot leaves town with his family, and the angels say, only one rule, do not look back. No explanation. And then here's the actual line, Genesis 19:26. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. And you said for reasons that you can't remember. There's no reason. They just said, if you look back and become a pillar of salt, no reason for it. And then if we want to extend this story, Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed. Lot has two daughters. He's a very old man. They end up living in a cave after this. And the daughters say, oh, geez, there's no more guys. And so our father doesn't have a son. He doesn't have any heirs. How are we going to get pregnant and give our father heirs? And they say, well, the only guy around is our father. So they take turns getting him drunk and having sex with him to get pregnant by him, so that they can bear heirs to his name.
Well, I have obviously been missing out.
The Bible is full of crazy stories like
nuts.
this. We also have the story of Goliath, David and Goliath, which I should have led with that one because I don't know if I'm going to be able to top that Lot story. The story of David and Goliath there's not too much of a story. Goliath is so there's the Philistine army which is attacking the Israelites. The Israelites are of course the good guys in the Old Testament. There are protagonists. Goliath is known to be a giant among the Philistines, and he offers a challenge to the King Saul or somebody like that, and says, "I challenge you to one-on-one combat as like a proxy instead of our armies fighting." And Saul won't take him up, but David, who's just a simple farm boy, says, "I'll take you up." And so David picks up 5 stones from the river, and he puts them in his sling, and he throws one and hits Goliath right between the eyes and knocks him down and kills him with one shot. And the whole point of this story is to prove, because David is going to become King David, who is going to he's in the lineage leading up to Jesus. So it's to prove that David is worthy of this sort of important place in this lineage. And that's basically how that story goes. We also have references to Noah's Ark, but I think everybody knows the Noah's Ark story. We have a reference to Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea. Yeah. I think this is something that everybody knows as well.
But it's also something that, is still, like, I've had relatives of my own send me like forward emails that have pictures of chariot wheels and horse skeletons at the bottom of the Red Sea. And I'm like, isn't this amazing? And then I just have to kind of bite my tongue.
That giant one, like where they've unearthed giants.
Yeah, that's what I'm with Kim.
Photoshop
I get
giants.
The giants. Kim and I are on the giants.
Okay,
we're feed. Okay, we're not on the chariots feed.
So maybe this is where we can transition into Don Verdean as a character and his motivations and what he's really about. So the one thing I find really impressive about him as a character is that he actually really knows his stuff, at least in terms of knowledge of the Bible and also biblical history. So whenever somebody says something, he knows locations, he knows geography, he knows where things happen, and he knows it all off the top of his head. So he actually is a very well-versed scholar, at least in the biblical narrative and also more broadly biblical history. And like, as an example, Tony Lazarus says, "Why don't we look for the Pharaoh's army under the Red Sea?" And he's like, "Yeah, we're just going to search 170,000 square miles. Like, that's not a good sample strategy." And that number is correct. That is about the right size for the surface area of the Red Sea. So like, he knows his geography. He knows stuff, right? His archaeological technique, of course, is nonsense, because when he wants to find, he goes to where does he go to find Goliath? He goes to the Valley of Elah, which is biblically where it says this event took place. Now, part of the flaw in his logic here is David kills Goliath in the Valley of Elah, but why would the body be lying where it fell, right? I'm sure they would have taken it and buried it somewhere. But anyway, so he goes to the place where the biblical account says this took place. His survey technique is to pick up a rock and throw it, spin in circles with his eyes closed and throw it, and God will guide it to the location of the grave. And so obviously he's not using real archaeological techniques. He also says earlier in the movie, "It's very obvious that I have never found anything based on my own intellect," which is to say that God is guiding him to his finds. So he's knowledgeable. He's not making stuff up. I guess like most pseudoarchaeologists probably are knowledgeable about a lot of stuff, but it's the critical thinking of connecting things and assessing information, which is the flaw, right?
They're half knowledgeable. They're knowledgeable on their own weird like angle on things. That's what's so strange. Like if you were to argue with a pseudoarchaeologist, and I have online, they'll immediately bring up, like if you're a scholar in pick anything, Egypt. If you're like a real scholar in Egypt, you will know the real history of Egypt. You'll know the dynasties and stuff. But the pseudo people will bring up weird shit that you haven't heard of. They'll be like, "What about Pharaoh Caliphadad from the 21st dynasty?" You're like, "What?" And then you naturally go, I have no idea what you're talking about. And the pseudo person goes, "See, you don't know." And they have this really weird knowledge base that is not based in reality or like the main chunk of knowledge, if that makes sense. So they just have odd knowledge. Sometimes they're very knowledgeable on certain things, but it's all piecemeal and strange. And if there's one of many things I've learned from like interacting with these people for years now, it's like, it's the value of a college education or of a graduate education focused on stuff like this, because you get real education. Of course, they would say, "Oh, you're just learning from the man, from big archaeology, you loser," right? But the reality is, you really see the difference. You really see the glass ceiling for these people's knowledge. They don't know certain things. They're ignorant of major things, so they make really odd connections. That's what you see. And actually, I would say the character Don Verdean is better than average in terms of reality. You know, he actually knows a lot of stuff. Somebody like Graham Hancock is knowledgeable about a lot of stuff, but even him, he doesn't know a lot of times the deep, real like knowledge or facts, because they read weird stuff.
Yeah.
But is it knowledgeable when it's all just made up stuff? Or isn't that just knowing how to put certain words together into a sentence?
Oh, it is, but it's this funny, weird combo of what they do is they take their knowledge base, which is already weird, already odd, and then they add a bullshit story, right? So it's so strange, right? So it comes over here. So actually, in a way, again, the various stories that are in Don Verdean, the various like weird connections, that's very true in a way. Like that's how that world works, you know? And so you're sitting here with real knowledge and you're like, I have no idea. What? I don't know what you're saying.
No. And so then you can't argue with them. No. So then they win.
It's just odd, you know?
And that distortion effect as well, that because everything is kind of diffracted through their lens, whatever their particular weirdness is, whether it's the Bible is literally true, whether it's aliens came, or whether it's, you know, the Vikings lived in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. That acts as a kind of refractory lens to anything that they take in. So, you know, we can have like a kind of knowledge piece like, oh yeah, the Vikings came, Leif Erikson was in L'Anse Assange or whatever the place is called, that there's evidence for that. But this person would take that knowledge and say, okay, and therefore that means that they must have come to Minnesota and made rune stones for Swedes to find years later.
That's exactly right. It's how it's done. Mm-hmm. The one other thing I noticed is a lot of times they'll even have some real knowledge, but it's really old. You know, you're obviously you read a book from 1974. You know, and so it's like, dude, I appreciate your interest, but like, know that that's really old, and modern archaeologists don't even say that anymore. You know, that happens a lot. Like when they push and push on Clovis First, I'm like, dude, Clovis First was a joke. When I remember my professors joking about that in 1991 when I was a freshman. So it's been a joke in academic circles for now, 35 years or whatever. There are bits and bobs of Clovis First you can still talk about in reality, but the overall idea of like Clovis First 13,000 years ago, it's like, that's very old.
Yeah.
Well, It's interesting to say that right now because a paper just came out redating Monteverde,
Yes.
and my initial reaction is like, oh, cool, but there's still tons of pre-Clovis stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I actually read through a bit of that paper, and the tone of the paper was pretty Clovis first. It was like, this is what we should check everything else just to make sure. And I'm like, oh, it really feels like these are Clovis first people. I was always told that there were no more real Clovis first people. So is there still a secret underground Clovis first contingent that still exists?
There is a little bit, but they need to, and I actually respect them, but they need to define their terms a little bit, because it's not like they can't just say 13,000 and that's it, because there's way too much stuff that's older than that. They are very scientific archaeologists, who I really appreciate. I have no problem with the Monteverde redates. I'm kind of like with you, Josh. I'm cool with the redating of that, but there's also, you can see pre-Clovis stuff at other sites. I will say a point they bring up: many of the really old dated sites, and by really old I mean like 20,000, 22,000. They are fairly crappy in terms of really pushing the date back. And I think a lot of archaeologists have played way too fast and loose with some of those. Like I'm looking at you, White Sands, and a couple of the others that it's not, you can't just go, and therefore this is proof that people were here 22,000 years ago. Ugh. Like they're weak. They're not, it's not that they're wrong. It's you're making a big claim, so you need something good. So I like the angle that the quote unquote Clovis firsters, but they're not truly Clovis first like it was in 1978. Like they got to kind of define that out. But anyway, it's something I like to follow.
All right, so let's get to this character, Don Verdean. Obviously, he starts blatantly faking artifacts throughout this movie, but the premise of the movie is that he's kind of washed up. He used to be kind of a hot shot, making his VHS tapes in the 90s. And we start with that tape where he finds the shears that cut Samson's hair. I don't know the story of Samson too well, but Samson's hair is where his power was. And so he let the secret slip to a woman who turned on him and cut his hair in his sleep. And then this turned the tides of the battle or something like that, because he lost his power. I'm not so clear on that story myself.
That's Delilah. That's the woman.
Delilah.
That's his hair.
And so he, in the video, they are supposed to find Samson's grave, but they discover it's already been looted. But then fortuitously, they find the shears, and so the determination is these have to be the shears that cut his hair because they're near his grave, which makes no sense. But so the question is, and then he finds Lot's wife, and then he gets a different pillar, which he still tries to pass off as Lot's wife. So to what extent does he really believe the things he's finding? Of course, the methodology is flawed, and the shears are not the shears that cut Samson's hair, but does he believe they are the shears? And does he believe that maybe one of these pillars actually was Lot's wife? Is he a true believer, or is he a true believer who starts faking his results later on because of pressure, or has he been the same fraud all the way along?
I think, if I can jump in, I know probably other people have ideas as well. My take from this is it's very much he is a true believer. He is an honest believer, and that the whole crux of the story is that, and this is something that definitely you see in real life with people, is that he sort of starts to think that, the method doesn't matter. It's what happened. What matters is the end result. If these fake artifacts will bring more people to the church, then that is the greater good. And so that's the slippery slope that he finds himself sliding down, I think.
Yeah.
And that is a kind of classic character study that you definitely see in real people, like creationists. That's what I'm thinking of, and sort of your kind of hardcore evangelists, is that some of the shit that they come up with is just crazy, but they're focused on what they think is the bigger picture, which is of bringing them people to the church.
Well, I think that those people just are bringing money to the church. I don't think they believe at all.
There's certainly some of those as well. There are cynical mega church pastors, but there's also the tiny church people as well that are there just because they believe. But I wanted to just bring up briefly something is that I love the story of finding Samson's shears and how they must have been the ones that cut his hair. And I was thinking about it quite a lot because there's been a story in the news this week in the UK about a guy whose dog dug up a Victorian poison bottle in his garden. I don't know, have you guys heard the story? I'll send the link to you. But so he found a poison bottle in his garden when his dog was digging a hole in the backyard. And he went to, it's on the BBC, so on the BBC website, because he looked up and saw that 2 doors down from where he lives, there had been a murder by poison. And so therefore, his dog had dug up the missing poison bottle from this Victorian cold case. But what made me laugh, because I've spent a bit of time, one of my hobbies is like mudlarking and kind of river walking for old Victorian glass. And any time you find Victorian, Edwardian, any kind of old pre-modern rubbish dump that has glass in it, you will find a poison bottle, because it was pretty much everything back then.
Everything was poison.
Yeah.
And they had it. It was just part of their everyday household things, right?
Yeah. And so they're lovely and collectible, but they're just everywhere. And so the fact that this guy had managed to spin out this whole story about it being the murder weapon from a Victorian cold case and sold it to the BBC, I thought was just exactly the same as the kind of thought process that Don Verdean had when he found these shears.
Yep.
To that point, Ross, there's a quote from Don Verdean. He says, "Finding treasure in the earth is meaningless unless it would help someone get to heaven who wouldn't get there otherwise."
Yeah.
So it's like a different way of knowing the world, right? He's not a scientist. He's not approaching it scientifically. He's approaching it from building meaning. And if he can find an artifact that has a meaning, then it's true, right?
Yeah.
That means that everything that we do is useless unless somebody happens to find faith through it.
Yeah. I'm glad you learned that today. At least something happened positive here. I know, that idea of whether these guys in reality, whether they believe they're bullshit or not. It people ask me that one all the time, actually, in the pseudoarchaeology world. And I think there's different people have, different strokes for different folks, but overall, I think they do. Ultimately, I think they know they lie at the beginning, because they lie, but I think they've quite quickly believed their own lies, because we're all the heroes of our own story. You know what I mean? I think like Graham Hancock or, pick your poison of these guys. I think they initially know, they must, right, that I am taking some bullshit here and trying to sell it to these guys over here. But then they kind of pull the wool over their own eyes and go oh, no, but there is a chance this is true. I think this is true. And they then convince themselves. That's why their lies are so convincing, because they believe their own lies, I think, right? I think they do that process, and I think that process goes quick, like maybe a day or two, and then it's in.
I wish I could just convince myself of things like that.
I know.
Everything's fine. Life will be good.
Oh, it is, though. It is. We live, to get a little too philosophical for a Monday morning, we do live in an amazing time, you guys. Would you want to live in 1649? Screw that. Like it's pretty good today.
Could be worse.
Yeah.
One last thing, and I'm sure we don't have an answer to this, but when we first meet Tony Lazarus in his office, he's got a map of the world on the wall with arrows pointing all over the place, showing some sort of, I assume, cultural diffusion. And I couldn't get a good enough look to determine exactly what he's showing on that map. But I was wondering if anybody caught that and had any idea about what that map was about.
Not sure, but it's almost for sure the Atlantean diffusion. They always use that one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for if you haven't heard, so Atlantean diffusion is where kind of all culture and knowledge comes from Atlantis, and then it spreads throughout the rest of the world through the waterways and stuff. So like if it starts in Atlantis in the Mediterranean or whatever, it goes across the Atlantic, then it goes up the Mississippi, and it goes down the Amazon, and that's how the Atlanteans basically came across the world, right? They came up the river systems from Atlantis.
But how is Atlantis hooked in with the Bible and stuff?
don't ask questions, okay? Just go with it.
Sorry.
And that's why you're not happy. That's why you're not happy right there. You need to just believe what I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You're welcome.
I might turn into a pillar of salt if not.
Exactly. Don't look back.
Do you want to turn into pillar of salt if you don't believe that's what's going to happen?
Sometimes, it'd be fine.
One more quick thing I've got in my notes here. Johnny Jerusalem is the name of this wrestler giant, and I had to look that up to see if he is a real guy, and he's not.
Yeah.
But one cool thing I found was a Reddit post on r/what is this thing, where somebody had posted a picture of a sarcophagus in a garbage dump in Utah where this movie was filmed. It is this tomb. So they created.
Yeah,
it's in a garbage dump in Utah, and somebody was like, "What is this thing?" It says Johnny Jerusalem, and is written in Hebrew.
See, that's where this stuff starts. Just with that.
Yeah,
it's like, and
then there's this whole new cult takes off. Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
All right. So, what do we think about this movie? Some of us like it. Some of us don't like it. Maybe what is the structural cinematic reason why this movie is not good?
Okay, I'll take this one because, as I always have to say to like brag about myself, I do have a film degree. Okay, so again, whatever I say is right, and you people are just fools. So I thought this movie was awful. And it's funny too, and I really like your guys' take on why you liked it. What I find really fascinating is as we talked it through, I think for somebody listening to this, it sounds pretty cool. Like we brought up a lot of funny moments and interesting things, and it sounds great, but I am a stickler for tone, and this movie's tone is horrible. And what I mean by that, it's way too far over the top. It is unbelievable constantly. And I know we can be like, well, maybe I'm in the mood for something unbelievable. But for me, you can't connect to any of the characters. Like, who are you rooting for? Like, there's nobody there. There's nobody who you see yourself in. They're just these over the top characters. And I thought it was odd. I think what they were doing, I'm guessing, they were almost going for like a Ron Burgundy Anchorman thing, where everyone's funny and stuff. But if you think of Ron Burgundy, what makes Ron Burgundy work is Christina Applegate, because Christina Applegate is the straight man. Right. And she's constantly going, Ron, that's freaking crazy. That's not what happens, and the comedy's there because she anchors the thing in reality. There's no anchor in this movie. Right. Yeah. To me, it would have been so much better if Amy Ryan was like that and just went like, hey, Don, no, we can't do this. That won't. What are you doing? Right. And then it makes it that much more funny because it anchors it in reality. So with no anchor, like I felt like I knew what every single scene was going to be before I saw it, and I was right every time. And I'm not very good at that. But I was like, okay, now this is going to happen. Okay, now this is going to happen. Okay, and the jokes were so obvious, I thought, and so over the top. I thought actually the starting with the VHS thing in the beginning was actually a terrible idea. I think if you actually cut that out and actually start in the church is immediately a bit better. The idea that a pseudoarchaeologist would be that shitty, with the VHS, they're not. They're way more like, think of Graham Hancock. Graham Hancock doesn't have crap like that. Like I would have played this more serious, and then it would have been funnier, if that makes sense, right? Like stop with, it's almost slapstick. It's like, oh God, here we go. I just, because of that, because of the way it was made, I'm like, this is horrible. Like I would recommend film students watch this and be like, this is what makes movies terrible. And then look at how it could have been better. Because again, when our discussions, it sounds great, but I'm telling you, I voted as one of the worst movies I've ever seen. And then near the end, like when Jermaine Clement pulls out a gun, I'm like, there's the gun. Like when I was in film school, I took a screenwriting class, And I remember I wrote something where like blah 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 blah, and then the guy pulls out the gun, and I remember the rest of the class went, oh, because it's the crappiest way of like solving a scene. And actually in it, I'm like, how did he get a gun into a hospital? What the fuck? That makes no sense. You know, there's a million times in this movie where it's like that would never happen. Somebody would never say that. They would never react that way. You know, like it's unbelievable in a bad way. So I think it's just pure shit. I'm so, you know, I'm like, that what a waste of money, and that's why it only made 30 grand. It's there's nothing to really be like, hey, go spend 2 hours and look at this. Like you're literally better off not doing it. But barring that, it was great.
I honestly thought it was going to be more of a slapstick. Like I thought it was going to be more over, like one of those so over the top that everything is ridiculous, and then you have to laugh at some things because it's so dumb. Right, almost to take a airplane way out, like that. Yeah. I think that would have been better too. I was expecting that.
I think what sort of strikes me is that it kind of doesn't really have an audience apart from maybe me, Josh, Kim, and Andrew. That it's making fun of things that people hold very dearly and don't want to question. So because we're kind of quite happy to make fun of pseudoarchaeology, we kind of recognize the humor in the fact that these guys are bad at it. But for people that follow Hancock religiously, or Daniken, or all these other kind of grifters, it's not going to be funny to them because it's it's a kind of article of faith essentially. And similarly, it takes some big pot shots at evangelical Christianity, which is the biggest denomination in the United States. So there's not going to be a lot of people that are going to find that very amusing either. So yeah, I'm not surprised it didn't make a lot of money, but I do think that it was quite funny.
No, you're right about the audience. Sorry, just one moment I have in my notes that carbon 14 correction bit that we talked about earlier. In my notes, I wrote carbon 14 correction bit, an audience of one, me. Like nobody else would care.
I found it interesting that this is written by Jared and Jerusha Hess, who are Mormons, members of the Latter-day Saints Church. And so obviously that's how they have so much background knowledge about the Bible. And I'm wondering whether they see it as, they are attacking evangelical Christianity, which is totally different from Mormonism, or whether they see it as Mormonism, evangelical Christianity, we're poking fun at the same thing here, right? And so I wonder from their perspective what they think they're doing. Because if they're, if they're considering themselves as part of a broader Christianity, then they're sort of, doing kind of a self-deprecating thing here. But I don't know, Andrew, maybe you should do a episode on Joseph Smith, because Mormonism is basically like a pseudoarchaeology religion, right? It starts off with pseudoarchaeology.
Joseph Smith is Don Verdean.
It is. I know. It's true. It's true. But it's like, if I didn't have to fear ninjas and assassins already, it's, it's like.
You want to go back to Utah one day.
I know. It's. I will say it's on the list, but those things, doing stuff like that, even when I did like Rosicrucian stuff, but there's other ones where I'm like, oh boy, those can be heavy. They can be heavy. I will say, funnily enough, though, it is on my B team list. I kind of keep a list of possibilities, and that one is on there too. And actually, for me, for the Mormonism thing, mainly because of Under the Banner of Heaven. If any of you have read that book, it's by the same guy who did Into Thin Air. Who the Mount Everest expedition where everyone died. He also wrote this book Under the Banner of Heaven, and it's about like murder, a real murder in Mormon country, and then but then he talks about the history of Mormonism, and I highly recommend Under the Banner of Heaven. It's great, and actually, I think they made it into a miniseries on TV, which is really good. Okay. So anyway, based on that, I was like, maybe I would go into Mormonism with that as a jumping off point. But So far, no.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us again. This was a great movie to have you on talking about with all the pseudoarchaeology stuff. Do you want to let people know where they can find you? Everybody who listens to us probably knows at this point.
You can find me everywhere in my media empire, but my main prongs of my media approach are my baby is really Kinkella Teaches Archaeology, my YouTube channel, right? But you can also find me on the Pseudoarchaeology podcast, which I guess is my other baby at this point, and I'm also a co-host on the CRM Archaeology podcast, and on various television shows from time to time on various outlets. But that's where I'm at, and I'm always happy for people to leave me a message. The easiest way I can get back to people is the messaging spot on my YouTube channel. That is the easiest, but anywhere, I always will take questions.
Do you have questions, comments, or movie requests? We want to hear from you. Find us on Blue Sky and Facebook at SOTSA Podcast. Send us an email to screensofthestoneage@gmail.com or visit our website at screensofthestoneage.com.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.